Welcome to CMM Off the Page, a podcast brought to you by CMM Magazine, a brand of Care Choices Limited. Guest speakers will equip listeners with take-home advice to support best practice in the social care sector. The podcast is available to listen to on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and to watch on the CMM website. We hope you enjoy this latest episode.
Care Choices is a multimedia publisher, event organiser and podcast producer. Care Choices works alongside industry governing bodies, local authorities and care providers to publish impartial information for individuals and their families or carers. With 30 years publishing experience, the largest portfolio of care and support directories in the UK and over 2 million page views annually, Care Choices is the perfect route for care providers to reach people actively seeking care and support. Contact Care Choices to discuss how we can help promote your business both online and in print. Give us a call on 01 223 207 770. We hope you enjoy this podcast.
Hello and welcome to CMM Off the Page. Today we'll be discussing how the care sector is supporting and will continue to support displaced people. It's been a year since Russian forces invaded neighbouring Ukraine, which has led to the displacement of almost 14 million Ukrainians. And since the start of the Ukraine crisis, the National Care Forum and many other care organisations have been working hard to help. The NCF, working in association with the Care Provider Alliance and other partners and specialists, have been looking to see how they can provide a meaningful employment opportunity for people and also a place to live. Sharing the proactive work carried out by the NCF, I'm delighted to be joined today by Professor Vic Rayner OBE, the Chief Executive of the National Care Forum, to share the organisation's progress in this area with a particular focus on Ukraine, and also to share vital resources to help care providers listening today. So welcome, Vic.
Thank you.
And CMM Off the Page is provider-led, so it's therefore fantastic to be joined today by Oona Goldsworthy. And Oona is the Chief Executive of Brunelcare, which is an award-winning Bristol-based charity providing high-quality housing, care and support for older people in the Southwest. And Brunelcare also has a very impressive history, founded during the Bristol Blitz in 1941. It's been supporting people to make the most of every moment for over 80 years, which is a really wonderful mission, Oona. And I look forward to hearing how the charity has been supporting displaced people today. Welcome, Oona. And finally, I'd like to welcome Tariq Raja, who is the Foundation Manager at the CareTech Foundation. Tariq has a number and a wealth of experience that focus on disaster relief and technology-based projects, and has been a part of several pioneering community outreach projects as well. And more recently, the CareTech Foundation has joined forces with Breaking Barriers, a charity. So we look forward to hearing how that partnership, very important partnership, is developing. So welcome, Tariq.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Fantastic. So I think initially, obviously, I just mentioned there the National Care Forum and the work that the National Care Forum has done in this area, very quickly off the mark as well from the beginning of the conflict. So Vic, it'd be really interesting to hear about the work that the NCF have done and sort of the progress. Now we are obviously 1 year on.
Yeah, thank you, Olivia. I'd be delighted to talk about that. So you're right, very quickly in relation to the conflict, we wanted to think about how we could work together across the partnerships of different care provider organisations and also housing organisations to identify opportunities for employment within the care sector. I mean, I think very early on it was clear that there would be substantial numbers of people coming from Ukraine, many of whom we thought would have great skills and experience that would be applicable within the UK care sector. So we wanted to try and draw together a whole host of resources and support for them. So a number of things were instrumental to the project. First of all was the kind of willingness of partners from across the board. So very quickly we were able to bring together legal representatives, organisations, representatives from refugee organisations, housing partners from the National Housing Federation, other members of the Care Provider Alliance, and key providers who were also working through and leading this. And it was great to have Jonathan from CareTech Foundation to come and tell us about some of their work alongside other organisations who were kind of leading the way around this. So key products that came out of that, the first of those was a jobs board. So very early on, we worked with an organisation called Cohesion, who fantastically quickly put together a jobs board that employers who had jobs that they wanted to ensure refugees and asylum seekers could see, those jobs were posted onto that board, and we could share that. That was free for employers to do that. We then linked that up through mapping software, and so jobs could be seen geographically. So if people were looking at jobs out of country, they could look to those jobs and see what was there. Then my great colleagues in NCF linked those also up with support organisations. So very quickly you could see not only if you were moving to a locality, either through relatives or through relocation, you could see not only what jobs were available, but also what other support organisations were around and what local authority it was in, and therefore identify what support the local authority had. So we were trying to bring all that together with the sense that information is key. So that's stage one, but let's see if, I'm sure we can feed into other resources that developed over time as we talk.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's really fantastic, Vic. And what's been the take up in that time from, and what's with provider? I suppose how challenging has that been? Because it's an enormous undertaking.
Yeah. So I mean, I think you ask a really pertinent point about take up, and I think that's a missing gap for all the sector in terms of understanding who is coming in through that route into employment. So there's lots and lots of kind of anecdotal information, and organisations like we're going to hear from Oona and Tariq and others who have been doing some of that work, but nobody's collecting that at a national level, and that's certainly something that I'm really keen that we do. However, we have produced other resources such as the pastoral care kit, which we know have been taken up and used extensively by organisations. Interestingly, both in terms of supporting refugees, but also in terms of supporting people who are coming as international recruits through the change that happened at around about the same time in terms of the opening up of the shortage occupation list to care workers. So I think there's some interesting parallels between work that organisations do to support refugees and asylum seekers that could also help them in terms of how they work with international recruits. And
Oona, obviously, I know you're patiently waiting there, and I just want to bring you in here because obviously Brunelcare have done a lot of work in this area. So from your provider perspective, what's the experience been like for you so far?
I think it is very different to international recruitment, and I'll go on and say a little bit about that. Our involvement with trying to recruit displaced people goes back before Ukraine. So in the summer of 2021, with the Afghan crisis, we were aware of large numbers we're based in Bristol, coming into Bristol and coming to live in hotels. So there was already a bit of there was a feeling about what can we do? What actually can we do about this? And the tragic circumstances that people were fleeing from. So it was really about looking at what we could do in terms of the community that we're in and part of, and what can we do? Well, we couldn't, we can't house people. We couldn't do that. We could do limited amounts of pastoral support, but we did have jobs, and so that it was that actually. And we know that people fleeing from the sort of conditions that they were in, being established, getting back on their own feet, a job is absolutely critical to that. That sense of well-being and being able to participate in a new community. So it was the sort of 2021 up to the Ukraine crisis as well that we were already working in that space. What was really key to us is not seeing us as the centre. So we didn't think that Brunelcare was leading the way. We worked with partner organisations in our communities and started to form alliances with those partner organisations working with refugees. We already knew them, we were already working with them anyway. So it was, it was about establishing that relationship. So how could we help them or work with them in order to look at how we might be supporting some of those refugees coming in? Now, at that time, most refugees coming from Afghanistan were in hotels. So we started to go to the hotels, actually. So it's often people are incorrectly termed as hard to reach. How do you have those hard to reach communities? And we flip it on its head and we say we're the hard to reach people, not others, not refugees, not people who are not in working for us. It's us that's hard to reach. So how do we make ourselves easier to reach?
Accessible, yeah.
So we went to the places where people were rather than the other way around and expecting them to come to us. And so we worked with our refugee partners, organisations, to go into hotels.
Okay.
Started to talk to people who just newly arrived, and actually over the months, of course, it was less newly arrived and more established people. What were the sort of jobs they were looking for? Could we help? And not just seeing it in terms of care jobs as well, because actually as organisations, we're quite big employers. We have a whole range of different services. So what were the jobs that we might have that were about hitting a number of different skill bases, whether that be, professional skills, and particularly people coming from Afghanistan were very highly skilled, actually, had very good English, very highly skilled. So we didn't narrow it down to a particular type of job. It was actually what sort of jobs you want. And that included whether it's catering or, hospitality or trades, skilled trades people, professional grade jobs as well. And then sort of having done some of that work, we looked at how ready were we as an organisation to welcome people in to work with us. And we felt very strongly that we needed to be ready ourselves.
And
So
how long did that process take, I suppose, in terms of that preparation?
It was probably a couple of months, really, about working, because it might be fine for me as chief executive to say, great guys, we've got, people coming in, do you want to come and work with us? And then find out as soon as people start work with us that there's a level of uncertainty, fear, all sorts of things because of the terrible narrative in our media about asylum seekers and refugees. And actually, to be honest, it's got far worse since then. So we wanted to make sure that people were coming into an environment where they would feel safe, they would feel able to work alongside colleagues who were understanding of the situation that they were coming from. So we had a number of workshops with our registered managers, with key staff, with the HR team, our HR team in particular, so that they could act as the conduit and support. And key to that, and Tariq will probably come in to say this as well, was an understanding of trauma. So a trauma.
I was going to touch on that as well, and talk.
Yeah, so I'll stop now, but there's a lot more I can say, but it certainly was about turning it on its head to say we had to have the culture, we had to have those support mechanisms in place if we were going to be able to deal with Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, no, to really understand exactly what that individual has actually gone through. Tariq, so I wanted to bring in that obviously Oona just mentioned about trauma, and obviously you've got quite a lot of experience within the disaster and that particular area. You've done quite a lot around community outreach as well, haven't you?
We're very fortunate that we have 4 grant streams that are available to CareTech staff members and to the wider social care and charity sectors. And for us, the main responsibility is about connecting the private sector, the public sector, and the charity sector together so that we can really start to build momentum towards something. There are really incredible, knowing, intelligent voices across every sector, but they don't necessarily have the platform to speak to each other. And that's what we try to facilitate. In the introduction, you mentioned our work with Breaking Barriers, and that's been quite eye-opening for us because on our side, in the charity sector, linked to a corporate organisation that has anywhere from 12,000 to 15,000 staff members, we don't get to hear about what the needs are across the board. For example, the refugees that Breaking Barriers is supporting sometimes have been stuck in the process for 10 plus years. That can be quite traumatic. But what we want to package that is, here is an opportunity to recruit somebody from a different perspective. Empathy is something that you can gain from life experience. And a lot of these individuals bring a lot of empathy to our sector, and our sector is the empathy sector at the end of the day. And that's what we need to harness. That's what we need to cultivate even further. A couple of points mentioned by Vic and Oona really resonated with me. The label and the titles we give to these individuals when we're talking about them. If you look around you at hiring managers, resourcing teams through every single organization, what you find is they're still there in the organization as a staff member, as a volunteer, as somebody maybe on the periphery, somebody who comes in on the weekend to drive. They speak those languages, they hold those beliefs. We just package them so differently and then present them in the news. And then all of a sudden, everyone kind of gets terrified of bringing them in to work next to you. What we have found is labels and titles are very important, and they are, at the end of the day, joining the care force as staff members, as people who want to contribute with the same goal as the existing staff members there. And I think that's really important. The other side of that is when you're talking to them, you have to build that confidence within your staff teams first. We are a grant-making organization, so we basically give money to other charities to deliver the wonderful things that they do, but we operate under a funder plus model through our in-kind agreement with CareTech Limited. What that basically means is, along with the financial support to run your program, you also get care sector expertise. So in working with refugees, we have been able to bring in CareTech's resourcing team in London and now Manchester, and work with them to build a more appropriate channel, because one size does not fit all. And we've got 6-figure vacancies in this sector, which are growing every month, every year. Every organization has, if they're small, they've got dozens. If they're large, they've got thousands of vacancies they have to address. And it is about challenging what people are doing and giving them an alternative to what the process allows already.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Tariq. And also you mentioned there about sort of the current workforce and the staff and changing perception. Oona, I wondered if it'd be interesting for you to share how you prepared your current staff for that transition period, and also how they actually supported, displaced people within the organisation.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a whole range of different things, but one of them is understanding that it's not just that individual, but the whole family they might have with them, and their sort of extended family, and that they're going to be coming with lots of other issues of not lack of understanding, but things we take for granted about even how the transport system works. How do you get to work in the first place? And one of our first mistakes was just saying, we turn up at 9 o'clock or whatever. Didn't give any instructions about how to get what form of transport to use. Didn't give any help in terms of the cost of that as well, just assuming people would have the resources to do that. So we learned a little bit by experience, I'd say, on that. And I think so it's about having somebody who isn't your manager to be that buddy, somebody that they could go to talk to that wasn't their direct manager. Also understanding that particularly people who are refugees have got a lot of, going through that refugee process, meetings with lawyers, all sorts of other things that they might have to do to fit into their work as well, and being flexible about that. Just the things that culturally you take for granted if you're living in a British society, that you have to explain to people. That's no different from international recruitment, actually, so it sort of helped us to learn on that as well. And I think what Tariq says about at the end of the day, it's people, isn't it? So it really helps to break down those barriers around somehow the otherness of people, which is just so awful, but that otherness of people. Generally, I think my colleagues, sort of the non-refugee colleagues, have found it really important to be able to understand the journeys that people have been on. And I just want to pick up a point Tariq made as well, because we have used those internal staff. So sometimes you forget about the diversity of your own staff group. So we've got for example, Ukraine. We've got a number of Ukrainian staff, so that provided that link through and that help with things like translation. For Afghanistan and for Syria, again, you find people that you've got on staff who already have those relationships, who already have some of those language issues as well. We put We tried to take away some of the barriers that we might have put in place about language, about skill bases. We made assumptions sometimes around things like DBS. Oh, that's going to be impossible. We'll never get a DBS. Actually, it was really easy. You know, so sometimes those things that you think will be a problem.
So do you think some providers are put off by the potential, you know, obstacles along the way, and they aren't necessarily, you know, almost, is there a certain scaremongering, or, you know, are some people put off?
I think that, you know, if you look at what we talked at the beginning about what the care sector has been through in the last few years, and is still going through, and I think people are quite exhausted. So anything you put in that says this is going to be quite hard or difficult or an obstacle, everyone's so busy, you just go around it. So if you making it easier for people and presenting the, you know, the advice, the guidance, the support for particularly registered managers, and then getting an advocate. So what we did, we got one of our registered managers, you know, who was an advocate, and one of our HR managers to be an advocate. So they would say, got a problem, I'll sort it. Got an issue, I'll sort it. And there were lots of other cultural barriers that we tried to address. This is important in terms of equalities anyway. So, you know, it was stuff we were doing anyway. But, you know, sort of, you know, after Black Lives Matters, to say it's okay to have those conversations. It's okay to say, to ask questions. It's okay to have a safe space for those conversations. We found, for example, you know, people who are newly arrived, so desperate to please and so desperate to fit in, would say yes to everything. And actually that was confusing to people, because they'd say, yeah, so misunderstandings would arise, which if we hadn't understood that, could have led to dissatisfaction from both sides. So actually allowing those conversations to happen about, yeah, I would do this or I would say that, really helped.
So it just comes back to the having an open culture, definitely, yeah. And, you know, is there a, you know, it'd be fantastic to hear, you know, a positive story, a positive care, you know, of an individual that's, you know, really who you've supported, and it's, you know, it's been really successful for you, if you're able to share.
Yeah, and I was also going to say about open culture, that the open culture means you also have to accept it won't always work, and it hasn't. You know, so we have had cases where people haven't turned up, have accepted jobs and not come through. And I've tried to explain that away with, look, there are so many things going on in people's lives that actually, that, you know, the trauma and all those other things, things change. And people get moved around, particularly in the asylum system. So a couple of the really great things is that we, I think by not thinking just too small, so we early on identified through one of the jobs fairs that we went to, refugee job fairs we went to, somebody who just newly arrived from Afghanistan, who was a professional project manager. We had a vacancy for a procurement manager. And so he's joined us, he's in our team now, he's working at, you know, that professional level, and he's just enrolled on a master's engineering degree. So he won't be with us for very long, actually. I think he's probably going to go off and be a civil engineer somewhere, but, you know, that's fine, that's fine.
Oh no, that's so brilliant to hear as well. And the whole team must, you know, just feel that, you know, if they've been part of that journey, it must be amazing.
Yes, and I will also go back to say, because care by its nature has a very diverse, you know, colleague base. We employ people from all over the world, don't we? With many different languages. So it's not that difficult to fit in, I don't think. So I think the cultures already are open to people who start often, you know, you get people starting perhaps in care work. And because we have so many jobs and we have so many opportunities across the sector, you can progress quite quickly. So you've got a very sort of, there's an opportunity for people to see that they can grow, and there's already that diversity within the workforce anyway.
Yeah, and I think that obviously comes back to the conversation around career pathway, doesn't it, and the importance of that within the care sector, for individuals to see that, definitely. Vic, I just wanted to bring you in here in terms of the government, and so do you think they're doing enough to support displaced people who kind of find for those employment routes?
I mean, the point Oona made about sort of people have been waiting 10 years in the system, I mean, I think is really important for us to understand, and the kind of ongoing things that people are then involved in terms of legal cases, appeals and so forth. And indeed, often the movement of people within the system to different parts of the country, and I think that again, presents us with some challenges, but also some ways in which we can show ongoing support to those people. So if people are moving to different parts of the country and are then going to be located there for a period of time, it's not that they won't find care organisations.
It's that joined up approach again, isn't it? It's everyone having those conversations and seeing how we can help each other and to ensure it's a continuous.
One of the things we talked a lot about when we've been meeting to talk about how to support refugees and asylum seekers was thinking about the development of some sort of refugee confident employment approach. How can we make it really clear to people who want to work in the care sector? This is an organisation that's had some of these conversations, that had gone through some of this thinking, and I think that there's a real opportunity for us as a sector to kind of very publicly demonstrate our commitment to welcome people with fantastic talents into care.
So do you think there's almost an education piece there for other providers to understand the process more and to see?
The sort of things that Oona and Tariq and colleagues have been through is their lessons. Of course, there's some elements which are unique to their own organisations in terms of structure and process, but I mean they're not steps that others won't have to go through. They might just do them in a slightly different way, or they might already have something there. I mean, the point about trauma is hugely important.
I was going to mention that.
We learned a lot from talking with colleagues in the NHS who'd had fully funded programs to support asylum seekers who'd been waiting for a year or more, so that sort of displaced talent into the sector, and that sort of idea that actually often trauma doesn't sort of hit people in a sort of linear way. It's something that may change because of maybe some fluctuations in housing certainty or news from home, or about levels of warfare that are going on. So there's lots of different reasons for that. But understanding how to work in a kind of trauma-informed way to support staff is vitally important for organisations who are going to take on working with this cohort of people. But it's also vitally important for all of us to think about as employers. So I kind of think that there is something about working through how to work with this group of people that will make all organisations better employers, because they will understand that the way people's lives are, if you think about anybody working in care who's been through COVID, there will be a high level of trauma that we are not yet properly equipped to think about and support people in. So getting that right for a group of people who are coming to work with you from that sort of displaced talent pool will make it better for all employees. And I think those messages are really
definitely important. So in terms of training, and Oona, you might want to come in here in terms of how to train the staff in that area and to be equipped.
I think Vic's right. We're just at the beginning of this, so we can say the words trauma-informed environment, but I don't think we've done it. And actually, we can learn from other sectors. I think, as Vic said, so NHS have done some work on that. I know particularly mental health charities. So locally, I'm talking to some mental health charities that we work with to say, actually, can you run a program for us to come in? I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. It's out there, that expertise. But I don't think we have adopted it as an approach, and it has to be, you have to adopt it as approach within the organisation. So trauma-informed environment, so that everybody understands that. And I think, we can talk about trauma in so many different ways, and our understanding of it can be different. So we could say, the trauma that comes from working through COVID, but is that the same level of trauma that you might have experienced if you've just left your whole family behind and your husband's in Ukraine on the front line? There are different ways that that's articulated. So I think if nothing else, what we gain from this is to think how do we embed that within our organisations to help everybody? Can I just come back to something, Olivia, about you said about the support, what more support we could get. So at the moment, I have tried, and it is pretty impossible to employ asylum seekers. So although they're on the shortage occupation list, have been some time, and theoretically we can, it is almost impossible. Because the barriers that you have to jump through in order to be able to get into employment are so circular, can't think of the right word.
Circuitous.
That actually, yeah, you just can't, it's Kafkaesque. You completely enter a different Kafkaesque nightmare, to be honest. And I think there are a number of things that would help with that if we could remove some of those obstacles, which is in the gift of the Home Office in government. That's about it. At the moment, it has to be a year before you can qualify. You have to have a failed claim, but you have to be in the process for appeal, and that appeal has not got to have heard. So you're ticking so many different boxes that it's almost impossible. And the organisations that we work with, the refugee organisations we work with, who work with asylum seekers, have said to me, just don't go there. Don't even try. It's just too difficult. And if you think of the numbers that we have got now, we've got numbers of asylum seekers coming into Bristol, for example, in hotels. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could actually, even if it's just work experience or just, some trial jobs, if we could work with people to do that, but we can't, pretty much, we can't. So definitely that would be my ask of government to look at that. And it would somehow help perhaps to balance out that terrible hostile environment that we've got at the moment about asylum seekers. If they're here, why can't we work with them? So that would be something I'd really want to push for.
No, thank you. And it just must be so frustrating, like having to and going through that process as well. And just not.
I mean, yeah. So yeah, a nightmare.
And Tariq, I just want to bring you back into the conversation. In terms of the Breaking Barriers partnership, I just wondered sort of if you could share the actual impact of that partnership so far, and in terms of the people that you're supporting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Vic and Oona have mentioned quite a few essential points that we have found through the partnership. I'll just list off some of the things that were mentioned that are relevant to the work that we're finding as well, that feeds into what can benefit the wider sector. Because I just want to be clear, we are a corporate foundation, but we're an independent corporate foundation that's supporting the entirety of the social care sector. So the first is education. We are funding education for these individuals. We are one social care charity providing access to the social care sector, but the other partners that Breaking Barriers work with are all non-social care. And that's really important because across the board, if you look at our 20 or so partnerships, we are many times the only social care partner that private or charity organizations are working with. And I think that is to the detriment of the entire sector, because you can't have one organization or one voice championing everyone at the same time. It needs collaboration and it needs ambition and enthusiasm from everyone. The government aspect has definitely come up in this partnership as well with Breaking Barriers. Key in that is placement of these refugees once they are given a right to live in the country. It really does matter because care homes are spread across everywhere. And so if we had conversations with government, the one thing I would plead for them to do is speak to providers, look at the vacancies. There are no other sectors with the same vacancy gap that we have. Can you work with social care providers to see where it is best to locate refugees who express an interest? 30% of Breaking Barriers clients express an interest in working in social care. It's actually less than 5% who will ever end up in social care because of where they are based. If they're based in central London, if they're based in the centre of Milton Keynes or the centre of Manchester and Greater Manchester, there are limited services available there. Those are mostly private hotbeds. Social care services are located mostly in communities and in the outsides of the city. See if you can locate them there. A number of clients that we have worked with Breaking Barriers got through the entire process and unfortunately could not accept the job offer because they were simply too far away. It was taking them 2 hours every morning and evening to get from home to the service and back again. That's highly inconvenient. It costs a lot of money to get through that day. And they're joining in junior roles as well. Then there's the requirements that come into the equation. Every employer will have a set of requirements, but they're usually dictated by what is required by the CQC or whoever else is governing. I think the important thing is that where possible, employers should be looking at flexibility. If they've been given access to the country after detailed background checks, you don't necessarily need to do a DBS check all over again. There's a requirement for references. These people have been displaced, sometimes, as I mentioned before, for a decade. How are they supposed to come up with references? Some organizations ask for 3 references. I completely appreciate the point that we're looking after vulnerable people in this sector, but at the same time, we have to use common sense as well and say, how can we use what's available to us in the best way possible? So look at what your requirements are, see where the hindrance is in recruiting more people.
Thank you, Tariq. Yeah, no, that's it just seems to be so many roadblocks, and especially when it comes to the process itself, like Oona was also mentioning earlier about those challenges. So yeah, need to review those practices by the sounds of it. Oona, you did obviously talk how you've successfully worked with the community and how obviously it's important not for the individual just to have a job, but also to be part of that community. And I just wondered what advice you'd offer to other providers listening on how they can effectively link up with the community. What did you do? And in terms of why is it so successful for you, do you think?
So most localities will have some organisation who is supporting refugees in that community. They could be very tiny voluntary organisations, or they could be more well-funded. Most local authorities will have somebody on the team who is responsible for refugees and for resettlement. So there's a really good contacts that you make, and they are the experts. So that's who I'd advise to go to. Ask their advice. Ask how they are connecting. What are the needs in that community, and what are the wider needs? Housing is the big one. It's always about housing. It's always about housing and moving around, and it's very difficult to take a job on if you're constantly being moved around and unsettled. So understanding what that support is available for people and for how long. Access to schools, where particularly for people from Afghanistan, is often very large families coming over. So that support for schools and how far away the schools are from people's homes, because that impacts on work and how people can fit into work. So understanding the whole aspects of people's lives and how that might impact on their work. But I've just never tried to be the expert. I've just worked with the organisations that really do know more, and I think that's why I always urge people to go out and seek those partners.
Yeah, no, fantastic.
We've got something quite precious, actually, which is we often don't think. We've got jobs, that's really important. And we've got jobs that are accessible, more accessible as well. So I think sometimes we just forget that. We've got something that not every organisation who wants to help or work with refugees has. We've got something quite important to offer.
Definitely, yeah. And I liked at the beginning, Oona, when you spoke about having that conversation with the individual to see what works for them. And I think that's all about exploring, isn't it? And to see how you can help them on an individual basis.
Yeah, and you said about that sort of putting yourself in those, sometimes what I've done is put myself in that I can't put myself in their shoes, but just trying to understand, goodness me, I don't know how things work. How do the banks work? Everything, every aspect of life, how does it work? Our language, what we mean. We use things like, we say, oh, I'd love to see you. Yes, let's meet up soon. And actually, we often don't mean that, do we? So the way that we use language and how we convey and how we communicate can be really confusing for people. And actually talking to some of our guys who we've employed is like, yeah, you just use language in such a weird way, British people. It's just really weird. So
I think that's really interesting. Yeah, and it's the same with like how different cultures. It's respect. It's respect as well, isn't it? And I think it's being aware of that. And
yes, we use things like cultural things around, particularly the way men and women interact. And so the way I would interact with the men who came to work with us, asking them, are you okay about shaking hands or not? I ask before I do it. So it's understanding some of those issues, and rather than putting people in a difficult situation.
Yeah, making them feel comfortable.
Sorry, Olivia, the other point to support to look to is the local authority, because the local authority will often have a team, and particularly in the context of Ukrainian refugees, will have a team of people who are there to support people to do some of those things that Oona's talking about. So to think about schooling, to help perhaps with housing, to help in that kind of way. So it's really important to try and utilize those resources that are available. And I think Oona's point about some of these organizations, particularly the refugee organizations, may be very small. Well, lots of the care sector is very big. How might we be able to support those organizations? CareTech Foundation is fantastic in terms of its kind of support to those organizations. Are we able to do some of those things collectively, maybe as groups of providers in a locality, that might make a real difference? And another really practical thing, I'm talking to a refugee organization who is supporting lots of people with employment, even really kind of straightforward things like employers being really clear in job adverts that this is a job that's eligible for the shortage occupation list. It's a really simple thing to add that kind of line in. If you're confident that you would confidently go out to international recruitment with that job, put it in the advert, even in the UK, because that will enable perhaps job coaches or people who are supporting asylum seekers who've been here for longer than a year to look for jobs, to see that this is something that's eligible. So there's some really practical things I think we can do, and there are some resources out there that will make it potentially more open to some of this fantastic talent.
Yeah, I'll take that point, because we haven't done that actually, Vic, so I'll do that as well. I think we've also funded some of those refugee organisations who exist on a shoestring. So rather than expecting them to, for example, when we were working in hotels, they came with us and we paid for it. Not a lot, wasn't a lot. No. We recognise that they can't just do it. They can't just do it. You've got to got to go to support them.
Yeah, no, definitely, absolutely. It's really, really strong. I love that community connection and how that's being successful in your area. It's really, really good to hear. Vic, I just wondered if you wanted to share some sort of signposting at this stage in terms of further learning, and also for providers listening who might be listening to this and then being like, lots of information, where do I go now? Maybe they need to hone in on a particular area. I know Skills for Care have done obviously like a number of webinars as well.
So there's lots of really useful things. So on the National Care Forum website, we've got some detailed information about all the work we've been talking about with care and housing employers together. So there's the pastoral care support kit, there's the jobs board that I talked about, there's the mapping tool, and a variety of different resources that are there. We also did some work with an organisation called Hestia and Skills for Care, where we focused on the issue around modern slavery, particularly trying to recognise that often people who are coming to this country are through asylum routes may well be vulnerable to issues around modern slavery. There's some useful resources there, toolkits for employers to pick up to start to have some of that discussion with their current staff, to help them to understand the things that they can spot, the issues that might be arising, the sort of signs and indicators around that. It's a very complicated area, and I think most people don't realise that the majority of people who are subject to modern slavery are in the UK already. It's not about people being trafficked here in that context. So I think understanding that and understanding what you as an employer can be doing to identify that, if you think that somebody is at risk of that, perhaps who's come to you through an agency or otherwise. So understanding that. So those resources are there. You mentioned Skills for Care. They've got some great detailed resources around international recruitment, as well as some of these issues around displaced talent. And I think if you go to look at some of the amazing organisations that support employment opportunities for refugees, there's lots of takeaway stuff from there around the things that you might be able to do, quick wins for you as an employer in that sense. And if you go to the mapping tool that we have on the Care and Housing Employers website, you can look at your own locality and see some of the local partner organisations that you might want to work with.
Okay, that's
interesting. That you can reach out. I mean, I think ultimately there's two kind of tracks in a way. One is about how you make yourself the best employer and make yourself confident and your staff team confident that you know that anybody who comes to work with you will receive the support they need and a kind of warm welcome. And then the second is to make yourself really visible to potential communities who you probably are less than visible to the wider community. I think that's the real Oona talked about people being hosted within hotels. That's a very invisible community because you don't, people are living in a room together and actually unless you go in there to find out, but they will be connected perhaps to faith-based groups or to refugee support groups or to through local colleges, to education, to language courses. And you just need to think about what are the routes that I can make myself visible as an employer to be able to ensure that people know what's available if they want to be part of the care workforce.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks, Vic. No, that was really really good sum up there of those two key areas. Oona, obviously some providers might be thinking, my workforce is, we're really struggling at the moment, time, resource, this all sounds, we want to do this. How have you managed that in terms of resource and sort of the commitment, I suppose, the wider commitment there?
I think it's probably good to be realistic. The numbers are never going to be great because there are a lot of jobs out there and people do have choice, often to where they want to go to. So what we've done is we've got a dedicated one of my HR team who's responsible for that. So is out there scanning, if you like, what's happening in the world, what's happening in terms of new arrivals, what's happening in terms of partnerships locally, how can we influence them, how can we get involved in them? And it's not a huge resource, it's part of somebody's job to do that. It just means it's not everybody doing it. So we've got that focus on it's somebody's responsibility to reach out to some of those partnerships and work out what we can do and be realistic about being realistic about what we can do and the levels we can do. It's a bit like, with international recruitment, it's never going to be massive numbers, but it's all about every little bit helps, doesn't it? This helps, that helps, and so on.
No, exactly. And obviously feedback from your wider work, from the wider workforce as well. What sort of comments and feedback have you had in terms of since you've begun this work?
Very, very little, which is really interesting. And I think that's a really good outcome. So very little because as I said, we're a very diverse workforce anyway, it's just somebody else. It's just somebody else. I think in the early days when, just after Ukraine war, there was probably more focus on it than now. And so the Ukrainians who've joined us are just like any other people really who join us. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was also thinking internally as well, just from the workforce internally.
That's what I meant. Yeah, that's what I meant. Very little because it's just somebody else.
Great.
The international recruitment is really interesting because we've done quite a lot of that in the last year as well. And so I think it's just like more people from all over the world. It's great.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Thanks so much, Oona. And Tariq, did you have any final sum up for providers listening, or maybe how they can connect with the CareTech Foundation?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've got a website, so please visit the website. It's got our contact details. We love to work with more organizations. We host Championing Social Care, so a lot of organizations will know us from that level of engagement as well. We have 20 major partners across the board, national and international. So there's plenty for staff members across the care sector to get involved in. But more importantly, if there is one thing to take away, it's about education. And I think all of us are talking about education over and over again, is the government needs to be better educated. We need to be better educated. Our counterparts in other organizations need to be better educated, but the workforce needs to be better educated as well. We have to share our learnings, and we have to be generous in sharing our learnings. We can't sit tight and say, this is mine and I have the lead with this. That doesn't solve the problem. What we need to do is make sure that we know what the government is doing. We're filtering that through to our staff. And if we have the capacity to build in the infrastructure for these individuals to join our workforce, we shouldn't be looking overseas. We should look at the people already in this country with the passion, commitment. It's low cost, it's more effective, and I assure you, from what we've seen so far, they are amazing people to have around the team, and everyone who gets to work with them rants and raves about how happy they are that they've joined.
Great. Thanks so much, Tariq. That was a really nice note to end on there. Yeah, and well done, and thank you for all you're doing to support displaced people. And obviously our thoughts at this time are with all those people who are obviously, in disasters and conflict zones still now, displaced. So thank you so much to our guest today, Professor Vic Rayner OBE, from the Chief Executive of the National Care Forum, Tariq Raja, who's the Foundation Manager at CareTech Foundation, and of course, Oona Goldsworthy from Brunelcare. And I'll look forward to seeing, obviously, this is a very moving subject and topic, so we will, of course, keep up to date. And obviously CMM, we've got blogs, we've got content in the magazine, so it'll be fantastic to collaborate with you and see how these projects are developing in the months ahead. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to CMM Off the Page. Explore CMM's portfolio of content, including daily news, blogs, a magazine, and CMM Insight webinars by visiting www.caremanagementmatters.co.uk. To make sure you don't miss a podcast, follow CMM on Twitter @CMM_magazine and use the hashtag CMM Off the Page to join the conversation and share your feedback. See you next time. CMM Off the Page. Listen, learn, lead.